Hey everyone, I hope you're as excited about the upcoming ACL World Championships as I am. As you all know, I'm a little bit of a nerd. I love to do research and analysis on matches and metrics, and so I've done a little bit of due diligence and homework on the upcoming World Championships, specifically as in regards to the singles players. So thought I'd put together a top 10 players going into the World Championships, just my own personal top 10 list. See what you think of it. If you have any thoughts, please comment. Feel free to let me know where I either hit the mark or I missed the boat, either one. But this would apply to either the Man of the Year tournament or just the regular pro singles tournament, as it were. So anyway, let me go ahead and start rolling through this. And again, let me know what you think. Hope you enjoy it. So first of all, let me just tell you what I considered when I did this, because I am the statistics nerd that I am. I couldn't just, of course, sit down and rattle off a top 10 list. I had to do a lot of research and analysis to get to this point. So I went through both nationals and all 7 pro qualifiers, and for most of the top players, I went ahead and compiled what their overall record was. And when I did that, I actually looked up who they individually beat and annotated it and who they lost to, so I could compare and contrast between different players. So I did all that, and then I compiled their record against the top 20 ranked players. And then I also threw in what their record was against what I considered to be other top tier quality players. Completely subjective, but what I did is I kind of sat in my head and said, well, you know what? Just to give you an example, Matthew SORRELLS, in my mind, is a top 20 player, but he didn't play in either of the qualifiers, so he doesn't have the points to be in the top 20. But when you play against Matthew SORRELLS, you know he's a top 20 quality player. So I just subjectively decided, you know, if you played a Matthew SORRELLS, you were going to get credit for a quality opponent. Same with James Baldwin. James Baldwin did not finish in the top 20, but I think we all know if you play James Baldwin and you come away with a win, or even a loss for that matter, you know you just played a world-class opponent. So anyway, completely subjective, but I made my own little internal list of who I consider to be quality players. Rule of thumb, I said if somebody was to tell me here's a list of their top 10 players and that player was included in the list, if it would raise eyebrows and people would look at somebody funny, then I wouldn't include them. If the player could be legitimately included in someone's top 10 list without causing controversy, that was my definition of a quality player. So anyway, the other things that came into effect here was head-to-head rankings, who's hot right now, and also just kind of gut feeling. So my disclaimer is that while I'm trying to be as objective as possible, I also am open to the fact that, yes, I clearly have seen some players more than others, so there may be a little bit of bias in here as far as who I've seen more often than other players. But I do think I've done a pretty good job of getting to know most of the players across the country and try to present this as objectively as I can. So, all right. Just a quick couple notes before I actually hit the list. Things that I discovered as I went through. Less people than I thought actually had winning records against quality opponents than I thought would have. It's apparently pretty hard to do to come out with a winning record against the caliber of players that we have in the ACL. So you'll see the statistics as we move on, but I just found it intriguing that not as many players as I thought would have really good records did. Also, as I put it together, I just want to tell you how hard this is to make a top 10 list. When I finished, I looked at some of the players that were left off the list and I said, what an idiot. How could you possibly have a top 10 list and not have these individuals in it? But then when I go back and look who I do have on the list, I'm not sure how I could take any of the people that are on the list off the list. So just throwing out there that this is way harder than it seems for anybody that has tried it before. I'm sure you felt the same way. Then last but not least, and you'll see this when we see the statistics, but the players to some extent sort of naturally fell into groupings fairly easily based on the statistics. So we'll see what that looks like as we move down the road. All right, so that being said, let's go ahead and start with number 1. And there's no surprise here. Number 1 with the best overall record, in both nationals and the 2 qualifiers that they played in. An astounding 28-4 for Jamie Graham. 13-4 record against top 20 ranked players. Additional 3-0 against quality opponents Derek King, Isidro Herrera, and Matthew Sorrells. Just a phenomenal resume going into the World Championships. His only losses were to Damon Dennis at the kickoff, Matthew Morton in a very tight match in the Rock Hill Invitational. He lost to CODY Henderson, and then Noah Wooten in a classic of a match at the final chase. So all 4 of his opponents that he lost to were really strong opponents, no real upsets there. So the bottom line, easy choice is the number 1. Jamie's not going to slip up at this tournament. All right, he's going to come with his A game every time. If you're going to beat him, you're going to have to bring your A game or A+ game. And it's most likely going to have to be a top-tier player that's going to beat him. He's just not open very often to being knocked off. All right, so let's move on to number 2. And again, no surprise here. Jamie Graham was 28-4 overall. Ryan Windsor's 25-4 overall. Jamie was 13-4 against the top 20. Ryan's 12-4 against the top 20. He had another couple quality wins against Frank Modlin and Jay Dotson. And his only losses on the year were to Josh Gross, Jamie Graham, Adam HISSNER, and Noah Wooten. Again, all really strong players. Between Jamie and Ryan, they just sit at the top. They're the cream of the crop. And they have, in my mind, and I'm not even sure that this is a controversial statement, but in my mind, they've separated themselves from the rest of the pack by about a half a notch. So number 1 is Graham, number 2 is Windsor. Now moving on to number 3 is where we may have the first semblance of, I think, disagreement with others. Number 3, I have Matthew. You can call me a homer, that's fine, I get it. But when you look at the overall statistics, I think hopefully you'll understand where I'm coming from on this. Matthew is 20-5 overall, 7-2 against the top 20. His other quality opponents included a split with Matt Sorrells, giving him an 8-3 overall record against top 20/quality opponents. So definitely not up in the tier with Graham and Windsor, but 8-3 against quality opponents is pretty good. He's finished very consistently all year long, with the exception of the last tournament. He fell off a little bit in the final chase, but he won his bracket at the kickoff, only falling to Ryan Windsor in the playoffs. He won the Rock Hill qualifier, beating Jamie Graham in the finals. He finished in 5th place in the Erie qualifier. He lost to Ryan Windsor in the quarterfinal. That's the only reason he didn't advance to the TV broadcast and have another top 4 finish. It's just the way the bracket stacked up. It was a very close game against Ryan Windsor. So his losses on the year came to Ryan Windsor twice, Matthew Sorrells, Justin Stranger, who was red hot at the time, and Scott Schultz. So the bottom line on Matthew, I feel like he's got as much talent as anyone else in the field. He plays well on the big stage and against the big opponents, but when he's off, he's susceptible to being upset. And that's probably the biggest thing keeping him from joining Jamie Graham and Ryan Windsor. All right, Noah Wooten coming in at number 4. And I debated back and forth between Noah and Matthew at 3 and 4. I would not argue with anybody the semantics of Matthew at number 3 and Noah at number 4. I could easily flip-flop them myself. Matthew was 20-5 overall. Noah is 19-4. Noah is 8-4 against the top 20, where Matthew was 8-3 against the top 20. Losses for Noah were to Sorrells, Graham, Windsor, and Pitcher. You'll notice 2 of those they have in common. They both lost to Ryan Windsor. They both lost to Matthew Sorrells. So their pedigree, their resume coming into this is pretty similar. The only reason I went with Matthew at number 3, the tiebreaker criteria for me was Matthew played much better in Rock Hill on the boards and at that venue. I think the slickness of the boards there suit his game a little bit more than Noah. Noah seemed to struggle a little bit at Rock Hill the first time around. Maybe it's because he was struggling, with some bag changes and trying to find the right bag for him. That's certainly possible. But the bottom line was, at this particular venue, Matthew played a little bit better last time. So that's what tipped the scale to Matthew here for me. All right. Number 5, 19-4 for Cody Henderson, 3-1 against the top 20, 3-1 against other quality opponents. And somehow he's sneaking up on people. You just don't hear a whole lot of people talking about Cody Henderson. Now I kind of get why. He was pretty quiet at the first national, and then he didn't play in the first 6 qualifiers. So pretty much for the whole season, no one was talking about Cody Henderson. Then he showed up at the last qualifier of the year at Erie and put on an outstanding performance, winning the singles event. And then he lost in the first round at the final chase, but then marched through the loser's bracket, beating a whole string of good opponents to compile that 19-4 overall record. But somehow or another, he's done it pretty quietly. So we all know who Cody Henderson is, and when you look at his numbers, he's as good as he ever has been. So don't discount Cody going into this. All right, number 6. All right, I don't care what the statistics say for this one. James Baldwin is James Baldwin. Period. End of discussion. There doesn't need to be anything else said. For the record, he's 10-6 overall, but you can throw that out. For the season, he didn't have any matches against the top 20, and the only 2 quality opponents that I had him down for were SORRELLS and Malone, and he lost both of those. But again, strike all of that. James Baldwin is James Baldwin. This is the World Championships. You see that he found his groove at the Pro Invitational, hitting 38 out of 40 bags there. I believe that you're going to see the real James Baldwin is the dominating James Baldwin that we're used to seeing. So, hey, the deeper he gets into a tournament, the more dangerous he gets. If you're going to beat him, I think you have to hope you catch him early before he gets hot. But do not sleep on James Baldwin just because he doesn't find himself ranked in the top 20 right now. Okay, moving on to number 7, Matthew SORRELLS. Overall record of 12-4, 3-3 against the top 20, another 3-1 against other quality opponents. He pulled out wins against Cal Malone, James Baldwin, Jay Dotson, and a loss against Devin Harbaugh. So overall, what I think you need to take away from this is, because Matthew did not play in the 2 qualifying events that he was qualified to play in, his point standings are really low. So he is not anywhere in the standings that you will see. But he did really well. He won his bracket at the kickoff event, and he had a pretty good run at the final chase. I think he would say that he wished he'd ran a little bit further in the final chase. But overall, between the 2 events he did play in, that 12-4 record is pretty strong. But when you consider he played 16 matches, and in my mind, how I count them, he went 6-4 against quality opponents, meaning 10 matches out of his 16 were against quality opponents. So that is a pretty tough row to hoe when 10 of your 16 matches are against that caliber of competition. I think he did a good job putting together a 12-4 overall record. So I got to watch him a lot at the final chase because he played Matthew twice, and all it did was reinforce what I learned about watching him 7 or 8 times playing Matthew last year in doubles. Matthew SORRELLS is the real deal, and he could walk away winning this thing without breaking a sweat. So don't discount Matthew SORRELLS as you go into this, just because he's not high in the standings. All right, number 8 is Adam HISSNER. Adam's got a 19-5 overall record, 3-4 against the top 20. He had another couple quality opponents that he won against, Jay Dotson and Frank Modlin, that allows him to come out with a 5-4 overall record against quality opponents. So definitely not quite up there with the upper tier, but still an impressive overall record. The fact that he ekes out a winning record against quality opponents, just barely over 500, puts him in the bottom part of the top 10, but he definitely belongs in the top 10. We all know who Adam is. He's a fiery veteran. He plays with emotion. Once he gets to the main stage, look out. And the closer he gets to the main stage, the better he's going to get as he starts to smell that stage getting closer and closer. So, congrats to Adam so far on a strong season, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him do some more damage. All right, number 9. Some people may find this one a little bit surprising that Greg Geary is ranked this low, and you'll see why here as I go through this. Overall, he's got an 18-5 overall record, which isn't too shabby, but again, it's not quite up there with some of the other players on this list. But here's where he gets caught. He's 4-3 against the top 20, another 1-2 against other quality opponents. They all happen to be Derek King. But anyway, that gives him a 5-5 overall record against top 20/quality opponents. Nothing to sneeze at. 5-5 against top caliber competition is a good deal, but it's not quite the elite level that the upper part of this list is at. So I will mention that him and Adam HISSNER, if you look at their numbers, they were almost identical, but they did have a head-to-head matchup, and Adam won that, which is why Adam ended up at number 8 on my list and Greg ended up at number 9. I think what Greg is really missing is he just, on the year, he did not have a quote-unquote big win against a big name. That signature win has avoided him in singles. His 5 quality wins, while they were quality wins for sure, none of the names of the people he beat were WINDSOR, Graham, Morton, WOOTEN, or any of those really top tier players. So, once he proves he can knock off one of the big players, I think maybe he can slide up on the list a little bit. All right, so now we're down to the final spot in the top 10, and I really debated long and hard on this. There's probably 5 or 6 names I could have thrown here and been just as happy, but ultimately I decided to go with Ryan Smith. Overall, Ryan's 15-6, a 4-5 record against the top 20. He lost to Matthew Morton twice, Jay Rubin twice, Adam HISSNER, and Scott Schultz. So, kudos, by the way. I think that's the 3rd time I've mentioned Scott Schultz's name. So, Scott, it's not noticed that you've knocked off some of the biggest players in the game. You just find a little bit more consistency, bud, and I think you're going to find that you can earn your way onto this list as well. So the impressive thing about Ryan was you can kind of throw out the qualifiers. He just didn't have good qualifiers. I don't think he even want to talk about those qualifiers. But if you look at the 2 nationals, the bigger of the tournaments, he found himself in the king seat of his bracket in both events, only to be double dipped, which isn't anything to be proud of. However, the fact that you can make it to the king seat is an accomplishment. So he made it to the king seat at both nationals, which is, to me, what caused me to give him the number 10 spot. The fact that he was 4-5 against the top 20, almost breaking even against it, is what allowed me to put him at the number 10 spot. Some of the other candidates, while they may have had some names or some big wins, or even more point totals than Ryan Smith, they suffered greatly in that record against top 20 opponents. So Ryan slides in at number 10. I will say I do want to throw out a few quick honorable mentions, and then I'm going to recap. But I will say that Jay Rubin has finished the season really strong. As I mentioned, it was on the slide right here, Jay Rubin double-dipped Ryan Smith at the final chase, and I know he's been throwing really well lately. So, honorable mention to Jay. He just didn't have quite as good a record against the top 20 opponents as some of the other guys. I think he was 3-6. Eddie Grindersleeve. I don't remember what his record was off the top of my head, but I know he had 3 tough losses. He lost to Noah Wooten twice and to Ryan WINDSOR once. So he's there knocking on the door. Trey Birchfield had a great record of 17-6. So hats off to Trey. He gets an honorable mention, but he was only 2-4 against the top 20/quality opponents. And then last but not least, I'm not even going to talk about their records, but just 2 players that I saw that were red hot at the final chase, excuse me, was Eric Anderson and Justin Stranger. They were both just red hot, dominating performances at times. And if they bring those games to the World Championships, they're going to break some hearts there. So those are my honorable mentions. So just to recap and to show all the records all on one slide, here's what I've got for my top 10. I've got Graham and WINDSOR there at the top, just some phenomenal numbers. Then I've got Morton and Wooten and Henderson all kind of really close in there with them. James Baldwin, I debated even throwing those numbers up there. They mean so little. Matthew SORRELLS, Adam HISSNER, Greg GEARY, and then Ryan Smith rounding out my top 10. All right, so that's my list. Let me know what you think about it. Any comments or thoughts? I'm certainly happy to listen. All right, thanks everyone, and I look forward to seeing you all at Rock Hill.